Good evening. I apologize again for being late, and it has been a week. Um, Not sure how well I can read today, but we'll give it our best shot. I've been having a little bit of technical difficulties here on my laptop, so um, I hope that if you couldn't join me live, you'll at least watch this later. Um, so I have a news story. I have a book. I always have people sending me books and things like that. And this one is called Gus and Me. And it is written by Keith Richards. Now, some of you might be saying, well, is it Keith Richards? Hi, Jade. Hi, Dawn. Perhaps you recognize the name Keith Richards. Yes, it is that Keith Richards from the Rolling Stones. There's a picture of him with his daughter. Um, he's been around a long, long time. And his daughter, Theodora, was the one who did the illustrations. She's a very talented artist. So let's start our story. Theodora, Theodore Augustus Dupree lived with 7 daughters near the Seven Sisters Road in a house that was filled with instruments and cake. Theodore Augustus Dupree could play the piano and scrape the violin, blow the saxophone, and strum the guitar. He had been a soldier, a baker, and the leader of a dance band. But now Theodore Augustus Dupree was my granddad. Now he was Gus. Looks like he did a lot of different things. There was nothing like visiting Gus. The closer to his house I get, the bigger my smile would grow. By the time I landed on his doorstep, I was all teeth. He had a big smile by the time he got there. He'd be waiting at the front door for me. Fix the sink, Gus, my grandmother would call out. Can't do, Emma, Gus would call back. Keith and I are going for a walk. He'd wink at me and whistle for Mr. Thompson Woofed, and our adventures would begin. There's Mr. Thompson Wolf. We'd walk for miles. We'd walk through towns. We'd walk through the countryside. And Gus, he would hum every step of the way. He'd hum whole symphonies as we strolled from one village to the next. He'd hum funny little tunes as we wandered skinny streets and smoky alleys, marching songs as we tiptoed around foggy bogs and ponds and explored silent forests. With Gus, you had no idea where you'd end up. Look at all the traveling. They'd go to a lot of places. One time, he led me all the way to the top of Primrose Hill to look at the night stars. Don't know if we can make it home tonight, Gus said. So we slept under a tree on top of a hill, with the skylights above us and the city lights below us. There they are underneath the tree. Once Gus walked us all the way to the workshop of a big store that sold instruments. Let's just pop in here. I've got to pick up some strings. Okay, Gus. Inside, it looked like a beehive. Gus lifted me up and sat me on a shelf so I could see everything. Violins hung from the ceiling by wires. Horns clung to the walls. Men in long brown coats fixed broken instruments and built new ones. I watched as they bent over cellos, trombones, and trumpets. They dabbed at the drums with glue and tapped at them with tiny hammers. Wow, look at all of those instruments. Isn't that amazing? Think a blink, think a blink, think a blink. Duck, duck, boom, boom, duck, boom. Men tested the instrument strings. Think a blink, and the drums. Duck, duck, boom, boom, duck, boom. My eyes followed a line of guitars that snaked around the room on a conveyor belt. And in the middle of everything, big bubbling buckets of glue went gloop, gloop, gloop. It was magic. I sat on that shelf watching it all. Right there, I fell in love with instruments. There he is watching everything. When Gus and I got home to the house that day, I took a long look at that guitar that always sat on top of the piano. It seemed more beautiful than ever. All I wanted was to make the strings go. Think of blink, blink, like the men, but I couldn't reach it. When you're tall enough, you can have a go, just Gus said. He must have really been small. Every time I visit Gus, I reached for the guitar. Even on my toes, I still couldn't reach it. One day, I felt like I was tall enough to grab it, but I didn't even have to try. Gus simply handed it to me. All yours, he said. Have you ever wanted something and you have to wait for it? Not fun. He sat with me, taught me how to hold it, strum it, and plunk a little. When you learn how to play Malaguena, he told me, you can play anything. Think a blink, think a blink, think a blink. And I practiced on that beautiful guitar. Looks like he practiced a lot. One day, Gus heard me playing Malaguena, and he nodded. Then he said something I'll never forget. I think you're getting the hang of it. After that, I took the guitar everywhere. I went to sleep with it in my arms wrapped around it. Even today, all these years later, I think of Gus. Every time I walk on stage, every time I write a song, every time I reach for a guitar and play a few think-a-plinks for my own grandchildren, I say to myself, Thanks, Granddad. Thanks, Gus. And I'll read a little bit about Keith Richards for Jada. Jade, you may not know. Hi, Ron. Ron, I bet you know who Keith Richards is. Let me read a little bit about who Keith Richards is. Keith Richards came from a musical family in Dartford, England. His mother, Doris, always had the radio on. His grandmother played the piano. He and his Aunt Joanna harmonized the Everly Brothers songs together. And his granddad, Theodore Augustus Dupree, Gus, played the violin, the saxophone, and the guitar. Keith grew up during and after World War II, when it could be hard to find a bright side of London. But Keith and his grandfather walked every inch of it together. On their walks, Gus took Keith to repair shops, and they watched as busy workers fixed broken instruments. One day, Gus showed Keith the major chords on a guitar and taught him to play the classic piece, Malaguena. This was Keith's introduction to music. Keith later began playing with the band with a group of friends, including Mick Jagger. They called themselves the Rolling Stones. Years later, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame named the world's greatest rock and roll band, and they still make music together today. Keith owns over 350 guitars, but he's never forgotten the very first guitar that his granddad showed him how to play. The bond, the special bond between kids and grandparents is unique and should be treasured. This is a story of one of those magical moments. May I be as great a grandfather as Gus was to me. And I don't know if you can see it, but there's a picture of Gus, and there's Keith with his guitar. There's Keith with his daughter that did the illustrations. That's an amazing story. And Keith Richards is really an amazing guitar player. If you haven't heard the Rolling Stones, look them up on YouTube. I think you'll enjoy it. But they've been around for a very, very long time, and they will be remembered for a long, long time. Again, I apologize because I have been kind of out of it for the last 2 weeks. Some of you know that my best friend's father passed away, and we had the service today. So now I can kind of start to work around some more things and get back on a normal schedule. So I hope that you all enjoyed story time, and I will see you next week. Promise on Wednesday at 6:30. Have a good evening. Have a good week, and we'll see you. Much love.